Sometimes we take our surroundings for granted. The trees we pass in the park, the crops in the field, our wife who got a haircut a week ago and we didn't notice and we get punished for the next... Okay. Buildings, other structures, you just drive by these things and you don't really think about it. But living in a place for a long time and exercising a certain amount of curiosity, you can sort of peel layer by layer and you'll learn a lot. A lot will be revealed if you're willing to observe. So in today's episode of Formosa Files, we'll look at a structure you've probably seen but don't know too much about. In particular, we're going to look at pailou or paifang ceremonial arches.
The Taiwan History Podcast, Formosa Files, is made possible through the generous sponsorship of the Frank C. Chen Foundation. Formosa Files.
Hey, Happy New Year 2025. Can you believe it's a quarter into the 21st century, John?
Living in the future. It's not quite
Seriously.
as advanced as I was promised.
Exactly. I want a refund. Anyway, so we were talking about stuff you see, but you don't think too much of. What are some of Taiwan's distinct man-made features? Of course, crowded streets, often without sidewalks, apartment towers, Taiwan's version of those townhouses or the walk-up apartment buildings all smushed together.
Yeah, and one feature is the often exposed concrete walls, the rebar, metal rods sticking out. You have these streaks of rust.
Yeah. Why bother removing them when you don't have to, right?
Hmm.
And then, of course, at night, the neon signs, the bright lighting. Kaohsiung in particular looks much more beautiful at night.
Haha, okay. And moving out of big cities like Kaohsiung to the countryside, we've got the irrigated patchwork of fields, fish farms along the coast, roadside stands.
Including the beetle nut girl occasionally.
Yeah. Where was I before you distracted me?
Your mind just went somewhere. I could see that. We were talking about features of the countryside. And I must say, you are somewhat easily distracted.
My only weakness, my dear fellow. Okay, countryside. But of course, on the crowded western plain of Taiwan, it's really a mix of urban and rural landscape. You've got fields mixed with houses, fields dotted with small factories, and among the fields, temples and small shrines, some only several feet high. You've got the Gong, the earth god, and quite often there's a little shrine for this general or that general. I forget the names.
Yeah, temples, man. What a density of temples there is. And there are some temple-like buildings which might confuse people because they're not quite like a Taoist temple nor a Buddhist one. These are columbaria or columbarium or barium. That's the plural and the singular. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing this, but columbarium, of course, you can hear the Latin origin, Latin columba, which means dove.
Hard to remember the name. I forget how many times I've had to look up the word for this building. But we were thinking about a clever way to remember it, weren't we?
What's that called? A mnemonic?
Yeah, mnemonic. Yeah, that's it.
So Christopher Columbus, inadvertently or advertently brought death to the Americas.
And barium.
Well, so don't bury them, cremate them, and then put them in a columbarium. Or barium. I don't know if it works.
Okay, Columbus and don't bury him. I forget the Chinese. Is it Guta? Bone Tower?
Bone Tower, no, close, but not exactly. Gu Hui Ta, the Hui means ash, so bone ash tower, which is actually accurate.
Well, okay, I think I remember now. My wife uses another term, Ling Guta.
Ling, spirit, so spirit bone tower.
Either way, I love it. The Chinese language is so often thought to be poetic, but it's often very straight, very direct. I'll give you an example that sticks in my mind. A long time ago, I was watching an old black and white Chinese movie from the 1930s, and a peasant bids farewell to his wife, promising he will return in August. But for the English language subtitles, the Hollywood scriptwriters translated August into a flowery quote, after 8 moons have passed, end quote. And they added some reference to plum blossom. Huh.
So a straightforward, I'll return in August is just too plain for them. They figured Chinese people would speak in a more flowery, poetic fashion.
Yes, in a more romantic fashion. But as you know, the English words for the months of the year are far more romantic and storied in history than their Chinese equivalents.
In Chinese, yeah, the months are simply numbered 1 through 12. January is 1月, 1 moon, or month 1. And likewise, August is simply 8th month.
Yeah, contrast that with the English August.
Named after, of course, the founder of the Roman Empire, Emperor Augustus. He was like, I'm just a humble emperor, but, I will have a month named after me. Julius Caesar has his month. I'll have a month.
I didn't realize he did that while he was alive. Okay.
From my
Well, that's right,
research,
that
yeah.
happened. Yeah.
In
Okay.
like 8 AD.
And the name Augustus comes from the Latin for venerable.
Okay, so getting back to notable and unique Taiwan structures, especially when you get out into the countryside, we mention columbarium or barria. What else?
Pigeon aviaries, those rooftop structures.
Ah,
Pigeon
yes,
houses.
of course. Yes, pigeon houses. They're usually blue, but I don't know why.
Me neither.
They are large birdhouses for pigeons, but these are not just pets.
Or they're not for egg farming. They're
No.
racing pigeons.
Yeah, but specifically racing pigeons for gambling.
Yeah, not for the love of bird flight itself. Yeah, quite a lot of money. What's another feature of the landscape? Okay, if you're in a city, or maybe you're driving down a small road, approaching a village or a town, archways, gates across streets, or in front of temples. They can be decorative or memorial. In Chinese, these are called pailou or paifang.
Yes, and they are such a common traditional feature of Chinese architecture that we usually overlook them. But not today, not on Formosa Files. So pailou or paifang archways, some are very highly decorative and some rather plain, such as some of the older ones that are there to commemorate people who were especially virtuous. In particular, they venerate women who were especially chaste, and I'm not totally on board with that being a virtue.
Huh. Okay. Filial means being good to your parents. But what does chaste mean, Eryk?
Right, John. Okay, you want me to do the dirty work. Fine. Chaste means abstaining from the pleasures of the flesh. Well, in the context, actually, of these memorial archways, it's closer to meaning a widow who doesn't remarry, because she's so loyal to her departed husband.
Which gives us a nice segue to the Lin family chaste and filial piety arch.
Oh, that's so Chinese. The Lin family chaste and filial piety arch. I have not been there.
I just came across it a few days ago while I was riding my Harley Davidson motorcycle along the coast. Leather jacket on, my blonde locks flowing in the wind.
Yeah, okay. Truth.
Okay, yeah. Maybe it was me just playing around with Google Maps.
Okay, so where is this chaste archway?
Dajia District, Taichung.
Dajia District, Taichung. Famous in Taiwan as where they have that temple, the Dajia Mazu Temple, where the pilgrimage, the largest religious event in Taiwan. I think it begins from there, right? 9-day, 8-event night held every spring. Okay, so anyway, tell us about this archway you discovered on your Harley.
Okay, it was built in 1848 and was erected in honor of Lin Chunnyang, a woman who was honored as a chaste widow, wife of a local figure, a Mr. Yu.
So a Lin For the wife and for the man, that different surnames.
Yes, interesting, but patience, my dear fellow, we're building up suspense.
Okay.
But going back to the courtship, Lin Chunyang was adopted as a child bride to you at the age of 7. When you died, Lin was only 11 years old. She chose not to marry and instead cared for her late husband's mother.
Child bride, 7, and she's 11 when her would-be future husband died, and she chose not to remarry. I see a bunch of red flags in this story.
Oh, just go with the story, okay? Anyway, I don't know how old she lived to, but yeah, she never married. She was celebrated for her chastity and filial piety. After her husband drowned not really her husband, but drowned at sea before they could get married. And so the local people built this archway.
She died before they could, so she wasn't even a wife yet.
Correct.
Okay. I'm looking at a local government website for this archway. It says, besides her chastity and filial piety, Lin Chunyang was also revered locally for her rain prayers, becoming a local deity known as Chaste Mother, and was enshrined at the Dajia Zhenlan Temple, one of the 3 deities of Dajia. Okay.
That's the Mazu temple you mentioned earlier, the starting and ending points of the annual pilgrimage.
Prayers for rain. Interesting.
Yeah. And I see a TV series was made about this.
Okay, here's another bit from another website. The story of Lin Chunyang's rain prayers was adapted into a historical drama series titled Taiwan's Strange Cases, produced by Mingshi FORMOSA Television. It aired in 3 parts, with actress Bai Bingbing portraying Lin Chunyang.
Bai Bingbing, that's a name some old-timers might remember.
Yes, she was the mother of the unfortunately kidnapped and murdered young girl by Taiwan's most notorious killer, Chen Jingxing. We did an episode about that. It's one of Taiwan's most memorable crime cases from 1997.
And it's our most Googled search, isn't it?
Yeah, it's way at the top. People are still fascinated by this story.
The archway celebrating a chaste woman is not a one-off. There are others scattered around the country. The island of Jinmen, which just lies a few kilometers off the coast of China, Jinmen, it has 3 of these archways. Most noticeably, the Chulianggong Mother's Arch of Chastity and Filial Piety, apparently the largest remaining stone arch in the Taiwan Fujian area, built in 1812.
Nice to be honored like that, but note how she's named via the sun, as the mother of said person.
Right, but there's a good reason for that. Qiu Lianggong, he rose from inauspicious beginnings to become Zhejiang Provincial Naval Commander-in-Chief.
Part of that inauspicious beginning was his father passing away 35 days after his birth.
His mother was unwilling to remarry, and despite facing great hardship, she did a great job raising her son.
Her son was a Qing naval commander, which in those days was a very busy and very dangerous job because piracy was really, really bad in that area.
Right, and this Qiu was one of the key figures who defeated Cai Qian, a powerful pirate. And this brought the piracy crisis to an end. You covered him in a solo episode you did.
Yeah, that was an interesting story because it's half myth, but the person did exist and they terrorized Taiwan. It was a husband-wife duo, pirate duo. Crazy story. She was alleged to have gone into battle topless from time to time. Probably not true, but still a good story. Cai Tren's wife was the piratess, Cai Ma, as they called her, Mommy Cai.
This archway is in the town of Jincheng on Jinmen. I've gone past it, but didn't know what I was looking at. Didn't know the history, so didn't appreciate it.
Okay, let's check the Chinese Wikipedia for a recap on this archway. It says, the Chou Lianggong Mother's Arch of Chastity and Filial Piety was built in 1812. It is the largest and most well-preserved ceremonial arch in the Taiwan Penghu Jinmen Mazu region and is a national monument of Jinmen. The arch was constructed to honor Madame Xu, the mother of Qiu Lianggong, a Qing dynasty naval commander of the Zhejiang fleet, for her 28 years of steadfast chastity after being widowed, and for raising her son to become a pillar of the nation. She is lauded as a model for her community, for her virtuous upbringing of her child.
Looking at a picture here, I see it's 4 pillars, and you got 3 tiered at the top. It's rather drab, which you would expect given its age. Quite tall, maybe 10 meters. At the base, there's a pair of male and female stone lions, some imperial decree plaque, and some additional stone lions on the top. Dragons and other motifs and what have you. This was crafted by mainland artists, and it's very high quality.
And you mentioned lions, and that's something else. We see them in front of sometimes even just ordinary buildings, but often in front of temples. And we don't think about them very much because we don't have lions endemic to Taiwan.
Right, yes. Yeah, even if you're like rich, you've won the lottery, you built yourself a mansion, you might want to put a couple of stone guardian lions out front.
I guess lions have been like cool for so many different civilizations, all the way to England.
Right. For the Chinese, they got it through the Silk Road, right? They got the idea, they got images of the lions, and then they were sculpting their own lions. But later, they actually had real lions turning up. So in the Tang Dynasty, maybe earlier, some people from the Middle East, maybe Persia, they sent these these gifts to China. And sometimes the gifts were animals, including lions. Anyway, Eryk, we've celebrated the chastity of women, of widows, but we should pay homage to the hundreds of thousands of mainland soldiers who, they had to sacrifice their desires, their personal desires for female companionship for the better of the ROC.
Okay, so 1949, right? The KMT government retreats to Taiwan. The island has already been in the possession of the Nationalists, or the KMT, since the end of World War II, 1945, October 25th. But by 1949, there's this exodus from China of 1.2 million, maybe more, mainlanders. Half that number may be soldiers, so maybe 600,000 men, and these are young men, mostly.
Yeah, a good estimate, about 600,000 soldiers, and many of them young and not what you would call career professional soldiers.
Not even volunteers, conscripted. One moment you're a teenage boy in a farming community. Next moment you're in a uniform. This is a gun. And the communists get closer. You're shipped off to Taiwan. This is literally the story of my wife's adopted grandfather who passed away about 5 years ago. He was not even 18 and just picked up from the middle of China and then found himself on a boat and told, "You'll be back in a few weeks." And he spent the rest of his life in Pingdong. Never married.
Surprisingly common story. Yeah, they didn't even have any training, really. It was just sort of picked up at the last minute and, off to Taiwan. But anyway, Taiwan, a better place to be than communist China. But these men were caught in a limbo.
The KMT was soon going to retake the mainland, go back to China. That was the official line. You could see signs all over the place during that time. They would carve it into every rock face, retake the mainland. So these mainland soldiers couldn't leave the military and they couldn't get married.
Yeah, that retake the mainland's a bit like my New Year's resolutions. A slogan's still good to use, next year.
I don't know. John, I think you probably did more to attempt to follow through with your resolutions than they did to retake the mainland.
Well, thank you. Yes, that's a reassuring thought. Okay, so in many ways, the mainlanders had it worse than the local Taiwanese because the marriage restrictions did not apply to native Taiwanese men who were in the army.
And this marriage restriction on soldiers went into law in 1952. There were various amendments throughout the years, one especially in 1959.
Around that time, a lot of the lowest ranking soldiers were actually let go, discharged. Late 50s, early 60s. There was a lot of pressure from the US for a more streamlined, efficient military.
Yeah, but imagine being one of these guys, right, who's been brought over and thank you for your service. Bye. And your idea of having a family or getting married is a dream that is very unlikely to come true. You're poor. You're not marriage material. You're not a catch, put it that way.
Yeah, you don't have that network that helps life.
Yes. The auntie to introduce you to this or that, or the,
Yes,
yeah.
yeah. No contacts. Yeah, so for the soldiers still in the army, there's pressure or restrictions because it was like if you're in active service at the front line, but hey, Taiwan's at the front line, so everyone's in active service, something like that. You're supposed to stay until you retire. It could be 40, 50. And some of these men weren't that financially well off. And yeah.
Seems cruel, but the civilian and military leadership had their reasoning. They wanted to keep people focused on their mission to return to China. If you had a family in Taiwan, that would reduce the desire to possibly sacrifice your life in retaking the mainland. It would increase the government's financial burdens. You got a whole bunch of dependents.
Yes. Of course, human nature is what it is. People broke the rules, but I think they weren't punished or, at least not harshly. And the leadership always looked at the soldiers' discontent as being about their homesickness, well, their sexual needs. And they also often mentioned the subtropical weather of Taiwan.
Okay, so, the heat. I could have been a civilized Chinese person if not for the heat of southern Taiwan.
Yeah. Yeah, the archives reveal that military leaders believed that, many soldiers' troubles were related to the denial or suppression of their normal access to sexual life, family life. Yeah.
I'm sure it was. I mean,
hmm
yeah, think of all the psychological problems, all of the, alcoholism, et cetera, et cetera.
Think of the freedom.
Okay,
Yeah.
yes, moving on.
Moving on.
Military leaders definitely were worried in Taiwan about all of this. But rather than thinking that the soldiers, like we just said, have a valid case and they're demoralized by bad living conditions, poor pay, homesickness, futility of this mission, and all these increasingly empty slogans, they generally preferred to put the blame on the soldiers for you're just lonely, you can't control yourself, you need women.
One of the solutions was the use of military prostitution, military brothels, which have a long tradition in this part of the world, most notoriously the comfort women of World War II.
Yeah, an update of the Japanese comfort woman policy less than a decade after the end of World War II.
Mm,
Not cool, not great.
not great. Though the women did it voluntarily, apparently. The military leadership saw these entertainment complexes as a good way to keep soldiers' morale up and to prevent servicemen from bothering female civilians. So on Jinmen, the first one was established in 1951. It was staffed by women recruited from Taiwan. And there were other such places, military brothels, that is, elsewhere, including on mainland Taiwan.
Yeah, and when you said voluntarily and you hedged it a little bit, I'm with you on that. We hear stories of like some maybe petty criminals being offered a chance to get
Mm.
some shaving off of their sentence if they go and do this, or perhaps pressure. I don't know if it was like a super voluntary thing, but anyway, the practice was quite long lived. Abolished on mainland Taiwan, I think in 1974, but on the
hmm
offshore islands, Jim and Matsu, it was still going in like 1990 or 92. So anyway, John, we've wandered off from pigeon houses and memorial arches for chastity and straight into quite the opposite.
Well, let's leave the island fortress of Jinmen and head to Taipei 228 Peace Park, where people can see two memorial arches.
So if you're a visitor to Taipei or a listener living in Taipei and you want to see a conveniently located memorial arch, there's a great option, the 228 Peace Park in central Taipei, just a short walk south from the main Taipei railway station.
Yeah, it's a great area packed full of historical goodies. And yeah, there are two arches in the park, both dating from the late Qing era, erected in the 1880s, and both moved from their original positions during the Japanese era. There's the Huang family Widows Memorial. It honors a widow who lived for 46 years following the early death of her husband and, of course, not remarrying.
And there's another arc, this time honoring a man, not for chastity, but for charity, rather. In 1881, there was this businessman called Hong Deng Yun, and he provided land and money to build an exam hall for students taking government exams so that they could sit these, ancient imperial exams in Taipei rather than having to make, at that time, the very long journey all the way down to the capital of Tainan.
And in 1888, Liu Mingchuan petitioned the Qing court to build a memorial archway inscribed with 4 characters meaning altruism and righteousness to honor Mr. Hong's righteous deeds. As we mentioned, this arch was relocated to the park.
I'm surprised that by 1888, Taipei didn't have its own examination hall for students. Because by this time, northern Taiwan had grown a lot. The tea trade, a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah. I'm surprised too. Might need to check that.
This would be the last years of Qing rule in Taiwan. Taiwan becomes a province in 1887.
Right. And Liu is the first provincial governor.
Tainan had been the prefectural capital, but there was a push to establish a new one. Governor Liu wanted to locate it in someplace halfway between north and south along Taiwan's western plains.
Chiayi City.
No, that would be Taichung.
Okay, Taichung's a convenient location today, but you know what? It wasn't in 1887.
There was no railway, not even a proper port, not that many people. Overland transport was slow and dangerous.
Taichung needed some infrastructure development before it was ready to be a capital, so Governor Liu made Taipei the temporary provincial capital while he worked on developing Taichung. But this never happened.
You know what else never happened was moving the capital to Taichung in modern times, which has also been talked about.
Oh, has it?
Yeah, they keep talking about it because think of all the space you would free up in Taipei. So they've been talking about it, moving some of the departments down. And then as soon as it gets serious, people are like, no, I think we want to stay here.
Interesting. Yeah, Taipei was formally made the provincial capital, the province of Taiwan, in 1894, just 1 year before the Japanese came.
Speaking of the Japanese, they brought their own kind of archway, the Japanese torii. So a typical one has 2 vertical pillars, poles, and 2 horizontal cross pieces, one straight, and then the top one curved. I'm sure people have seen these because they're all over the world. Torii are often, if not usually, made of wood, painted red. Thinking about it, though, they can be constructed from stone, metal, or even concrete.
I've got a couple of torii in a local park just a few minutes away.
Listeners might be wondering, are the torii and the Chinese archway, the paifang, basically the same thing, maybe just like a different design? The Japanese one having cleaner lines, and the Chinese one being a bit more ornate?
They're both archways, and there are some similarities, but differences too. Paifang are commemorative archways, sometimes honoring virtuous individuals, or like the torii, marking the entrance to a sacred space. That's what tories are, right? They're sort of the entrance for Shinto shrines. They symbolize the transition from the mundane world to the sacred world.
Shinto is Japan's homegrown religion. You will hear a lot of scholars talk about how it was co-opted and turned into nationalism, but used to be pretty much a sort of animistic, is that what they call it?
Yep.
Everything has a spirit, right? The Japanese built many torii gates in Taiwan to go with all the shrines they built, but most were either removed, knocked over, or just fell into disrepair after the KMT came in 1945.
Not that easy to find them today, but like I said, I've got 2 in a local park, about a kilometer away. But more impressive is the Chinese archway, the paifang, just 200 meters from my house. It's a large, colorful one. It's for a Taoist temple. It's got all the trimmings, a pair of dragons on top, the 3-star deities, and at the bottom, guardian lions.
So, yeah, if you come to Taiwan, send us your pictures of the torii you find or the paifang archways, or just post on Facebook and tag us.
Or any architectural feature around you. It's good to make sense of our environment step by step, piece by piece.
All right. Well, we're going to leave it there. Sorry about my throat. 95% of Taiwan has a cold right now, but we'll be back in action next week. And season 5 will be dropping just after Lunar New Year. Thanks for listening. I'm Eryk Michael Smith.
I'm John Ross. Bye.